Clearlock. The Trump-like buffoonery and recklessness of Boris Johnson has, I think, been fairly evident to most people in this House and in this country for quite some time. But if there is something of a silver lining to the grim public health emergency and pandemic situation that we're facing, it is that buffoonery and recklessness on Johnson's part has been further revealed. And of course, for most people, everything, Brexit and everything else, is currently being seen largely through the prism of this unprecedented COVID-19 emergency. And that buffoonery and recklessness on his part has, to my mind, undoubtedly contributed to a worse situation developing tragically for many British people in terms of his slowness and reluctance to impose public health measures, his sort of dismissal at the initial stages of the seriousness of the pandemic. But I hope, both in Britain and indeed in the United States, that that sort of recklessness and buffoonery that Trump and Johnson represent has been exposed in the eyes of more and more people, and I would hope that that's also true, and I believe it is true in the north and elsewhere. And given that sort of recklessness which they've displayed in this is again, continuing with Johnson, essentially raising the spectre of a crash-out Brexit with the disastrous consequences that would have north and south of this island, it seems to me we have to use this opportunity to show ourselves to be so much better than what Johnson represents. The recklessness and the buffoonery that his politics represent. If the possibility of a crash-out Brexit emerges because of his attitudes and policies and his plans for a race to the bottom, we have to make the case to people in the north in particular for a break and a move towards a united Ireland. And I think, the case, for example, for an all-Ireland response to COVID-19 is very apparent to people north and south, and is something, if you like, that has been resisted by Johnson, resisted by some in the northern political system, but is very apparent to huge numbers of people north and south, regardless of their community background, that it makes sense to have an all-Ireland response to a public health emergency. But it also, of course, makes sense to have an all-Ireland response to the threat of a no-deal Brexit. But if we're going to make that case, and I would say to talk about the possibility of uniting the north and south of this island, in every single regard, we have to show ourselves to be better than Johnson. And of course, in terms of the response of this state to the public health emergency, notwithstanding some differences of opinion and emphasis, there's no doubt our response has been better than Johnson's. But we have to continue to be better in every regard. And one area that it seems to me just is blatantly obvious is if we're going to make the case to unite this island to people in the north, we have to, as a minimum, have an all-Ireland National Health Service that is properly resourced, with the capacity, where we treat our health workers well and properly, and so on, because people in the north are not going to be attracted by the idea of a united Ireland if it's a united Ireland involving a two-tier, under-resourced, under-capacity health service. So it seems to me one thing we could and should do now is indicate our determination to move to a proper immediately to a proper national health service, something that's become apparent to us in responding to COVID-19, but would also play a critical part, I think, in trying to win people in the north of this island who maybe still retain their allegiances to the UK, that actually being part of a united Ireland would be about being in a state where we have a proper national health service on all parts of this island.
Thank you, Bugger